The planet loomed in the viewport like a predator, its swirling storms and jagged continents bathed in the pale light of a distant sun. Officially designated Tiamat 3, it was called a death world by anyone who dared speak of it. For Dr. Lila Voss, it was a challenge worth risking everything for. She adjusted the seal on her exosuit, ignoring the way her fingers trembled. "How long until surface entry?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot tightening in her chest. 10 minutes, give or take," replied Cade Darrow, the pilot and lead explorer. His rugged face bore the scars of a dozen survival campaigns, each a testament to his skill and his recklessness. "You sure you want to do this? Most people don't survive their first day down there." Lila shot him a sharp look. "Most people don't have my tech." She gestured to the slim module affixed to her suit, a prototype adaptive field generator designed to stabilize microenvironments. "I didn't spend 6 years developing this to watch someone else screw it up." Cade smirked but didn't argue. He had seen too many scientists crumble under the weight of Tiamat 3's reality. Lila was different, though. Beneath her precise words and clinical demeanor was a core of steel, the kind that didn't break. The shuttle shuddered as it entered the atmosphere, the turbulent winds slamming against the hull. Outside, the planet's surface came into sharper focus, endless ridges of blackened rock, rivers of molten metal, and forests of razor-sharp crystalline growths. Nothing here welcomed life. When they landed, the airlock hissed open, and the planet's hostile breath surged inward, only to be blocked by the suit's filters. Lila stepped out first, the soles of her boots crunching against the brittle ground. Her gaze swept across the landscape, taking in the jagged horizon and the faint glimmer of something moving in the distance. "Welcome to paradise," Cade muttered, joining her. Lila ignored him and activated her generator. A faint hum surrounded her as the device calibrated, projecting a bubble of stabilized atmosphere. The air smelled faintly metallic but breathable. She took a cautious step forward, her heart pounding. "Signal's weak," Cade said, scanning the area with his handheld device. "Magnetic interference is worse than we thought. You sure we'll find what you're looking for out here?" "We have to," Lila said firmly. "The mineral scans are clear. There's something beneath this crust that could revolutionize terraforming. If we can harness it—" She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what was at stake. Humanity's colonies were failing, stretched too thin across too many hostile worlds. Without a breakthrough, extinction was inevitable. They pressed onward, the terrain forcing them to navigate slowly. Lila's thoughts churned as she walked. Every step brought new challenges. The ground shifted unpredictably, crystalline shards threatened to pierce their suits, and the air seemed to pulse with an unseen menace. "You ever wonder why these planets hate us so much?" Cade asked, breaking the silence. "They don't hate us," Lila replied. "They're indifferent. We're just not supposed to be here. Well, they're doing a damn good job of making us feel unwelcome." A sudden vibration underfoot made them both freeze. The ground split open a few meters ahead, a geyser of superheated gas roaring into the sky. Lila stumbled back, her suit alarms blaring. "Stay close," Cade barked, pulling her upright. "This place doesn't give second chances." As the geyser subsided, Lila's eyes caught a flicker of movement near its base. A cluster of glowing, semi-transparent organisms clung to the rocks, their forms shifting like liquid flame. "Did you see that?" she whispered, awestruck. Cade followed her gaze and frowned. "Whatever it is, don't touch it. Things that glow out here usually mean trouble." Lila ignored him, edging closer for a better look. The organisms seemed to pulse in time with the vibrations beneath the ground. A wild thought struck her. What if these creatures were the key? "Cade, these things, they're alive, but they're thriving in conditions we can barely endure. If we can study them—" "Study them later," Cade interrupted. His voice had turned sharp. "We've got company." Lila turned to see a massive creature lumbering over a distant ridge. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, its body a mass of jagged exoskeletal plates, its limbs moving with terrifying purpose. "Move. Now," Cade ordered, gripping her arm. They ran, the ground shaking beneath them as the creature charged. Lila's lungs burned as the atmosphere outside her bubble grew thicker, heavier. Her field generators strained to maintain stability, its hum growing erratic. "Cade, we won't make it back to the shuttle," she gasped. "Then we don't go back," he said grimly. "We find cover." They dove into a crevice just as the creature thundered past, its bellowing roar reverberating through the rocks. Lila pressed herself against the jagged wall, her mind racing. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "No kidding," Cade muttered. "But unless you've got a better idea." Lila's eyes darted back to the glowing organisms. An idea began to form, reckless but possible. "I need to collect a sample." "Are you insane?" "Probably. But if these things can survive out here, maybe they can help us adapt. Isn't that what we're here for?" Cade swore under his breath but relented. "Fine. But make it fast." She scrambled out of the crevice, her hands shaking as she extracted a containment vial from her pack. The organisms pulsed brighter as she approached, their glow almost hypnotic. Carefully, she secured a sample and sealed the vial. The creature's roar echoed again, closer this time. "Time's up," Cade yelled, pulling her back toward the crevice. They huddled together as the creature prowled nearby, its heavy steps shaking the ground. Lila clutched the vial, her heart hammering. When the creature finally moved on, Cade exhaled sharply. "You'd better hope that sample's worth it." "It will be," Lila said, though she wasn't sure if she was convincing him or herself. As they made their way back to the shuttle, the planet seemed to grow quieter, as if watching them leave. Lila's mind raced with possibilities. If these organisms held the key to survival, everything could change. But first, she had to survive long enough to find out. When they finally reached the shuttle and the hatch sealed behind them, Lila collapsed into a seat, clutching the vial like a lifeline. "This is just the beginning," she murmured. Cade glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Let's hope you're right." Outside, the storms of Tiamat 3 raged on, oblivious to the seeds of hope that had just been plucked from its hostile surface. The lab's artificial lights hummed softly, casting sharp reflections against the reinforced glass walls. Lila leaned over her workstation, her face illuminated by the faint bioluminescence emanating from the organism contained within a sterile field. It pulsed faintly, its movements almost deliberate, as if aware of her scrutiny. Behind her, Cade paced with restless energy, the click of his boots against the floor a sharp counterpoint to the quiet focus of the room. "You've been staring at that thing for hours. What are you expecting it to do? Wave hello?" Lila didn't glance up. "Patience, Cade. Breakthroughs don't happen on a schedule." He stopped pacing, crossing his arms. "Breakthroughs also don't happen if you burn yourself out. When was the last time you ate? Slept?" Lila sighed, finally stepping back from the workstation. Her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, but her determination burned brighter. "This organism is reacting to stimuli in ways I didn't anticipate. It's not just adapting to its environment, it's actively modifying it. If we can replicate that ability, we could stabilize entire Deathworld ecosystems." Cade rubbed his jaw, skepticism etched into his features. "And what's the cost?" "I've seen enough planets to know that tampering with native life doesn't always end well. This thing could turn out to be as dangerous as the rest of Tiamat 3. That's why we test, observe, and adapt," Lila replied, her tone sharp. "If you're looking for guarantees, you're in the wrong line of work." Before Cade could respond, the lab door slid open with a quiet hiss. A tall, imposing figure entered, Administrator Soren, the project's overseer and the closest thing to authority in this chaotic frontier. His expression was unreadable, his dark eyes sweeping over the room before settling on Lila. "I hear you've made progress," Soren said, his voice smooth but laced with expectation. Lila straightened. "Preliminary analysis suggests the organism's adaptive capabilities could revolutionize our approach. With enough time, I can engineer a system to stabilize Tiamat 3's environment. Maybe even make it hospitable." "And if you're wrong?" Soren asked, his gaze unyielding. Cade interjected, his voice cutting through the tension. "If she's wrong, we'll know soon enough. But if she's right, this could change everything." Soren's expression remained impassive, but his silence carried weight. After a long moment, he nodded. "Proceed. But understand this, failure isn't an option. We've sunk too many resources into this planet to walk away empty-handed. As Soren left, Lila let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He's always so inspiring, Cade quipped, but his attempt at humor fell flat. Over the next few days, the lab became a hive of activity. Lila and her team worked tirelessly to understand the organism's properties. Under controlled conditions, it demonstrated a remarkable ability to neutralize toxins and stabilize volatile compounds. More intriguing, it seemed to form symbiotic bonds with other organisms, enhancing their resilience. But progress came with setbacks. Several experiments ended in failure, the organisms reacting unpredictably to artificial stimuli. The pressure mounted with each misstep, Soren's presence looming over every update. On the third night, Lila found herself alone in the lab, staring at the latest data stream. Fatigue weighed heavily on her, but she couldn't stop. The pieces were there, tantalizingly close to fitting together. "You're going to drive yourself into the ground," Cade's voice broke through the silence. She turned to see him leaning against the doorway, a steaming cup in his hand. He crossed the room and set it down beside her. "Drink. You look like you need it more than I do." Lila offered a faint smile, grateful for the gesture. "Thanks. I can't stop now. We're so close." He pulled up a chair, his usual bravado tempered by something softer. "You've done more in a few days than most people would manage in years. But you're not a machine, Lila. You need to step back before you break." She hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. This isn't just about me. If we fail here, it's not just Tiamat 3 we lose. It's the colonies, the people counting on us to make this work. And you think carrying all that on your shoulders alone is going to help? Cade asked. "You've got a team for a reason. Let them do their jobs." Lila sighed, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "You're right. I hate that you're right, but you're right." The moment was interrupted by an alarm blaring through the lab. Both of them jumped to their feet as the main console lit up with warnings. "Containment breach," Lila muttered, her blood running cold. They sprinted to the containment chamber, where the organism pulsed erratically, its glow intensifying. Cracks formed along the surface of its containment field, and the air shimmered with an unnatural energy. "What the hell is it doing?" Cade shouted over the noise. "It's reacting to the field, trying to escape," Lila said, her mind racing. "If it breaks out, we could lose everything." She grabbed a control pad, her fingers flying across the interface as she attempted to stabilize the field. The organism thrashed, its movements growing more violent. "Lila, we need to shut it down," Cade urged. "No. If we kill it now, we lose any chance of understanding how it works," she shot back. "And if we don't, we could lose a lot more." The room seemed to hold its breath as Lila made her choice. With a final keystroke, she altered the containment parameters, flooding the chamber with an energy pulse designed to calm the organism. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the organism's movement slowed, its glow softening. The alarm silenced, leaving the lab in an uneasy stillness. Lila slumped against the console, her hands shaking. That was too close. Cade exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." As they surveyed the aftermath, Lila's gaze drifted to the organism, now resting quietly in its chamber. For all its danger, it represented something extraordinary, a chance to rewrite the rules of survival. "This isn't just about adapting to Deathworlds anymore," she said softly. "It's about learning to coexist with them." Cade looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Let's hope the rest of the galaxy sees it that way." They stood in silence, the weight of their mission settling over them. Beyond the lab, Tiamat 3's storms raged on, a reminder of the battle yet to come. But for the first time, Lila felt a spark of hope. The colony's central dome glimmered against the backdrop of a turbulent sunset, its reinforced panels shielding the settlers from the tempestuous winds of Tiamat 3. Inside, a nervous energy filled the air as the team prepared for the culmination of months of relentless work. Lila stood at the heart of it, her gaze fixed on the holodisplay that projected a detailed simulation of the test ahead. "This is it," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "Do you ever get tired of saving humanity?" Cade's voice cut through the tension, light and teasing, though his posture betrayed his own nerves. Lila allowed herself a small smile. Not yet. Good, because I'd hate to think we risked our necks for you to retire before the big show. The big show was nothing less than the first live deployment of their environmental stabilization system, a fusion of human engineering and the adaptive capabilities of the Tiamat organisms. If it worked, a section of the Deathworld's inhospitable terrain would transform into a livable zone, the first of its kind. If it failed, the repercussions could be catastrophic. Administrator Soren entered the control room, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Status report," he barked. Lila straightened. "The stabilization modules are in place, and the organisms have integrated with the system. We're ready to initiate the sequence." Soren studied her for a moment, then gave a curt nod. "Proceed." The room fell silent as Lila's fingers moved over the console, initiating the startup sequence. Outside the dome, a grid of towers surrounding the test zone began to hum, their bases glowing with energy. Each one housed colonies of the adapted organisms, their biological processes amplified to interact with the planet's chaotic environment. As the system activated, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The air shimmered with refracted light as the energy field expanded, pushing back the swirling toxins and stabilizing the ground beneath it. The oppressive winds softened, their howls replaced by a low, resonant hum. "It's working," someone whispered, disbelief mingling with awe. Lila didn't allow herself to relax. "Hold steady. We need to monitor the organism's response. If they destabilize..." A sudden jolt shook the room. Alarms blared, and the hollow display flashed red. One of the towers flickered, its energy field faltering. "What's happening?" Soren demanded. "Field instability," Lila said, her voice tight. Her hands flew over the controls, trying to compensate. "The organisms are overloading. They're absorbing more energy than expected." Cade leaned over her shoulder, scanning the data. "If one tower fails, the entire grid could collapse. And if the grid collapses," Soren added grimly, "we're looking at a chain reaction. This whole zone could go up in flames." Lila's mind raced. "We need to redistribute the load manually. Cade, take the east tower. I'll handle the central node. Wait, what about the field? If you go out there..." "There's no time to argue," she snapped, grabbing her helmet. Cade swore but didn't hesitate. "Fine. Just don't get yourself killed." They suited up and exited the dome, stepping into the surreal calm of the stabilized zone. The field hummed faintly around them, holding back the chaos beyond its boundaries. In the distance, the malfunctioning tower flickered dangerously, its light dimming. Lila reached the central node, her boots crunching against the crystallized ground. The interface panel glowed faintly, its readouts erratic. She worked quickly, rerouting power and adjusting the energy flow to stabilize the grid. Through her comms, Cade's voice crackled. "East Tower is holding, but it's close. How's it looking on your end?" "Almost there," Lila replied, sweat dripping down her brow despite the cool air inside her suit. The ground trembled beneath her, and she glanced up to see a jagged crack forming in the stabilized zone. Her heart skipped a beat. The planet wasn't just reacting, it was fighting back. "Cade, we've got a problem," she said, her voice steady despite the rising panic. "Yeah, no kidding," he shot back. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster." She finished the adjustments and watched as the central node's light brightened, the energy field surging with renewed strength. The flickering tower steadied, its glow stabilizing. "We're back online," she said, relief washing over her. But her relief was short-lived. Beyond the field's edge, the massive creature they had encountered on their first expedition emerged from the storm, its jagged exoskeleton glinting in the dim light. It let out a low, resonant roar, its many eyes fixed on the grid. "Cade," Lila said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I see it," he replied grimly. The creature charged, its massive form slamming into one of the towers. The impact sent a shockwave through the field, causing it to flicker. "Lila, get out of there," Cade yelled. She didn't move. Instead, her mind worked furiously, scanning the grid for a solution. The creature was targeting the towers, perceiving them as a threat. If it brought down even one more. "Cade, I need you to distract it," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Distract it? Are you out of your mind? Just trust me." He swore again but obeyed, firing his suit's flare launcher to draw the creature's attention. It turned toward him, its roar shaking the ground. With the creature momentarily distracted, Lila rerouted the field's energy, creating a secondary barrier around the towers. The organism-based system responded instantly, adapting to the new configuration. The creature charged again, but this time it hit the barrier and recoiled, confused by the sudden change. It let out a frustrated roar and retreated back into the storm, disappearing into the swirling chaos. Inside the dome, cheers erupted as the system stabilized. Lila and Cade returned, exhausted but triumphant. "That was reckless," Soren said as they removed their helmets, though his tone carried a grudging respect. "Reckless works," Lila replied, her voice weary but resolute. For the first time, a part of Tiamat 3 had been tamed, its hostile nature turned into a livable space. It was a small victory, but one that carried immense significance. As the team celebrated, Lila stood apart, gazing out at the transformed zone. The work wasn't done, not by a long shot. But for the first time, she felt something other than the crushing weight of responsibility. She felt hope.